Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me again for another live Q&A session here on my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Angela. I am a full-time voiceover artist and audiobook narrator, and my channel is dedicated to those of you just getting started in this wonderful world of voiceover and audiobook narration. And through my channel, I share with you tips, tricks, techniques, things that I do every day in my own voiceover business, and then we get together in these weekly chats to talk about a topic or two. Today, we are talking about basically the technicals of audiobook narration. You got a job, you got offered a contract, now what? Right? So we're going to be talking about audiobook manuscript prep, and then also we can talk about file formatting and like naming conventions, things like that, organization. So if you have questions about these things, this is the time to ask, and there are no stupid questions. So get that right out of your head. I hear that a lot. This is a dumb question. This is a rookie question. No, we've all had the same questions. I can guarantee it in the beginning. So if you have questions, ask. This is your opportunity to get that question answered. So let's go over to the poll really quick, because we do a poll, and that kind of gives me a pulse on where everybody is. And today's poll is, where do you have the most trouble with audiobook production, just getting started with the audiobook production? And I've got my poll way over here. So far we have 30 votes, and it looks like 10% of you said you have issues with the file naming and organization, 10% manuscript prep. 53% of you said character voices, so we can touch on that a little bit. And then 28% of you said ACX formatting requirements, and that was pretty tough for me too, because everything is so new. It's a delicate dance with all the effects to get everything to sort of work together in harmony. And the trouble with that really is that there isn't really one direct or linear way to get that done for everyone, because of all the variables we talk about, right? Everyone's got a different space, microphone, voice, proximity, DAW. I mean, there's a lot of different variables to consider. So there isn't like just one easy button, right? So if you do hear someone on YouTube, apart from myself, because I have videos on what to do with these as well on your DAW specific, just know that you can't take what they say and directly apply it in most cases to what you're doing on your DAW. It's just not going to directly translate from their space and setup to your space and setup. So your best bet in that respect is, if you're having trouble with ACX requirements with your specific DAW, I would say if you have a question about that, please ask, and we'll see if we can help at all during this session. But if it doesn't, you might benefit from hiring an audio engineer to help you with that, or just, again, join groups. You can ask a lot of questions in groups, join a voiceover Discord, audiobook Discord, and ask those questions. You might get someone that is available and able to help you. All right, now with that out of the way. Okay, so we'll focus on, we'll talk about what I'm going to talk about, and then we'll get into character voices and things as well. But what I wanted to show you guys was, and these are mainly for the people that are just getting started. Maybe you haven't even started auditioning yet. You just kind of want to give it a try and see how well it works for you. We've talked about Project Gutenberg a little bit here on my channel throughout the years. And for those of you that are unaware, if you go to gutenberg.org, let me go over to this page here, gutenberg.org. This is where you can find audiobooks that are, books that are in the public domain, meaning they are out of copyright. So if you want something to practice with, this is probably going to be the easiest way to do that for you. So what I'm going to do is just kind of scroll down here and see what floats our boat. Let's just go with Frankenstein, because that's a good one. So once you select a book, you're going to come down here to all of the different versions or formats in which to view the book or download the book. So let's go with plain text. Make sure that StreamYard is keeping up with me here. Yes, it is. Okay. So using this format here, let's just pretend that this is my first audiobook. So how do you come up with, or how do you name the files? How do you organize the files? Well, the first thing I would do is create a folder on your desktop for each platform that you're either auditioning on or finding work on. For example, you want to have a folder for ACX, you want to have a folder for Upwork, you want to have a folder for Fiverr, you want to have a folder for voices.com, wherever you're finding work. And then maybe even also a folder for direct clients, because you will eventually have those. So for the ACX, let's just pretend this is an ACX book that I have, right? This is my first audiobook on ACX. So I'm going to create a folder within my ACX folder with the name of this book. That way everything stays organized right from the jump, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is, this is my manuscript. It's a little bit different because it is a public domain book, but the information that we need is still here. So your very first, actually here, let me just show you this because I can't show two screens at once. So what I'm going to do is show you what you're looking for. Basically are the release dates, the author name, and the title of the book, because these are what you're going to need for the opening and closing credits. And to get started, we're going to find the table of contents. Now, using the table of contents, I can see there are 4 letters and then there are 24 chapters, which means I'm going to have 30 files for this book, 31 with the retail sample, right? We have 24 chapters, we have 4 letters, that's 28, plus the opening credits and the closing credits and the retail sample. So we're going to have 31 files in total for this book. Now, how do you name them? I'm glad you asked. Let's go over to, I'm going to remove this one here, and then I'm going to, I'm going to go to, we're going to stop screen sharing that one. I can't show 2 at once, which is kind of upsetting, but we're going to go over to my Adobe Audition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, actually, you know what? I'm going to backtrack a minute because people ask me what kind of workspace I use for my Adobe Audition. If you go to Window and you go to Workspace, whoops, you have all of these different sort of layouts for Adobe Audition. I use the radio production one because it just gives me all of the elements that I need for voiceover and audiobook narration. So that is the workspace that I use. And that is basically what you see here. You can also change it here at Workspace Radio Production. Okay, so let's get into creating the files for this audiobook. So I'm going to go to File and New, Audio File. You don't want to use a multi-track session. A multi-track session, which is this one here, is going to give you multiple tracks, and you want to use that for more or less mixing multiple tracks together. So for instance, if you have like a dual or a duet narration, or if you're doing something on the voiceover side, maybe you're doing a meditation and you're adding music, a multi-track is basically what it sounds like. It's multiple tracks that you're going to ultimately mix together into one track. So for audiobooks, we want to go with just a singular audio file. So we're going to select that. And then I want to make sure that that shows up on my screen. Hopefully it does. It looks like it's not. Okay, so let's do this then. Let's go over to Let's share my entire screen so that way you guys can see it, because it's not going to do you any good if you can't see the entire screen. So let's go entire screen. Let's go over to my Adobe Audition. Sorry for this, guys. This is sort of frustrating. Okay. Let's go here, and then let's go here, and hopefully that will work. All right, so back to what I was saying. We go to File, New, Audio File. Let's make sure that that is sharing. It's a little bit delayed. Okay, and then Audio File. I'm just making sure it works, because it doesn't do you guys any good if you can't see what I'm doing. There we go. Okay. So the first file name is going to be, and this is how I name it. I start with 00 underscore the title of the book, which in this case would be Frankenstein, right? And then underscore, oops, if I can spell it right, opening credits. Now, it doesn't really matter what sample rate or bit depth I record in, because we're going to change it later. So if you want to record in a larger sample rate or a higher sample rate and a higher bit, that's fine. We can always change it later. So I always keep everything right around 48,000 for the sample rate and a bit depth of 24. And then once we have this file, I'm going to open another one. And the next one is going to be 01 underscore. And if you want to just copy this part of it, right, the underscore, title of the book underscore, copy it. That way you can paste it in later to make this process faster. Do that. I do it. Just makes sense. Now, if this book had like an introduction, a dedication, a foreword, a prologue, something like that, that is where this would go. This book doesn't. It goes right into those first 4 letters, if you recall. So we can call this file letter 1. And once we hit OK, I'm going to come up to the metadata box over here in the title, and I'm going to type in letter 1. And this is the information, this metadata, this is the information that's going to show on the screen of the listening device that the person is going to be listening to this book on. From what I understand, ACX will also add this information. If you don't, but this has just been a habit of mine since day one, so I do this anyway. Maybe in my mind it's a fail-safe, just in case ACX doesn't or something changes on their end and they don't add these anymore. I don't know, but I always do. It's always been a habit. Okay, from here, the next file is going to be, can you guess what it is? 02. And then I'm just going to paste in the underscore, title of the book underscore, and then the next one is going to be letter 2. Now, it's going to be the same using the table of contents. That's the easiest way to determine which file is going to be what. So using that table of contents, I'm going to go through and I'm going to create a file for each one of these audio files first. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So once this one is created, let's just pretend we've gone through all of 4 letters and all 24 chapters, and then the very last the very last file is going to be, let's open it up, audio file. So if you recall, there was going to be 31 files total, but number 30 is going to be the closing credits. Okay, so we've gone through and created all of these files, and then we've got the opening credits, we're pretending we've got all of those files in there, and then our last one is closing credits. And I don't create a separate file for the retail sample up front, because I typically just take a little snippet, 5 minutes or less from the very beginning of the book. Usually the introduction or the prologue, whatever it is, like the first big body of the text. is what I use for the retail sample, about 5 minutes in length. And then I just rename that title of the book, retail sample. So pretty simple. And just make sure that you check to make sure that that meets ACX standards. So that's pretty much how I create the files, but then each one of these needs to be saved somewhere, right? So we're going to save it as, we're going to go to my desktop. We're going to go to my ACX. Let's just pretend this is an ACX book. And then I'm going to put it, once I create a new folder for it, we're going to call this Frankenstein, right? Hit enter so it's there. And then we're going to save these files in my Frankenstein folder. And then with Adobe Audition, if I hit Control S, it'll go to the save again. It should automatically populate the last place you saved something to. But if it doesn't, you could just go to Browse and then go back to where you saved that folder for this particular project. And if you get into the habit of doing this at the beginning, it becomes sort of just part of the process, and you won't end up inadvertently losing files, because that does happen. And I would definitely save all of your auditions to that same folder. Like any ACX audition that you do, save it to the ACX folder, as you probably saw on my computer. But keep everything in that one folder for each platform. It'll save you, believe me, from having to lose files, because it does happen. I've done it many times. So once you go through and save all of the files, oh, I forgot to add letter 2 up here in the title. This would be letter 2. And then you would do the same with each of the other files. For chapter 1, that would be chapter 1, so on and so forth, all down the line. And then that way, when you're ready to start recording, you can have as many of these files open that you plan to record for the day. For me, if I have an audiobook to record, I'll put on my agenda book, today I have enough time to narrate chapters 1 through 4. And I'll write that on my agenda book. So when I come to sit down to record, I'm going to open up here, chapters 1 through 4. So that way I know that I need to get all of those done. And once I have them recorded, I just close them. So they're not in my view anymore. So once, like for instance, once I have the opening credits done, I'll save it and then close the file. I'll save it, close the file, and then once I'm done, right? And then I can move on to the next thing that I need to get done for the day, if that makes sense. All right. Let's come back over to StreamYard. So that is how I name my files. Let's check and see if we got a lot of comments, so I'm sure we have questions about what I'm doing. Let's see. If you have questions about what verbiage goes into the opening and closing credits, I can share that with you too if you have questions about that. If there's any particulars about what should be included in a file or not, you can ask that question too. I'll be more than happy to answer that for you. And then I'm sure we'll get into some character voices. I'm sure there'll be some character voice questions, but let's see if we can get some of these comments in. Abe was here even before I think I was awake this morning. Yeah, I wasn't even awake when you sent this one. Abe says, good morning from Nashville. May your edits be few, your mouth noise be soft, and your uploads be easy. And do what Abe says. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things, all the YouTubey things. I appreciate that. Christy Lynn is here. Hello. Good to see you. Life Unleashed says, good morning all from sunny Cape Cod. Last big day of harvest. I'm so excited. What are you harvesting? Paul is here. Hey, Paul. Good day, Angela et al. The only item on the list today that I have issues with is character voices, though my current project has a mere 24, so that's not proving too tough. We actually went through character voices in the last audiobook class that I held for Avio's Journey Academy, and we talked about differentiating the narrator voice from different character voices and how to easily create character voices for each of the different characters. I always recommend, if you have trouble with making character voices in a subtle way, because remember, any character voice that you choose to use for an audiobook, you have to make sure that it's a voice that you can sustain, right? And this is a time where you need to be really honest with yourself. Can you do accents? Can you sustain any of the character voices that you're creating? Because you will have to sustain them in some points. So I would say, if you have a large list of characters, and keep in mind, some of these characters are not going to be prominent. They're not going to be main characters. You'll probably have 10 or less in a larger fiction book that are going to be main characters. And then all the other characters are going to be, I hate to say throwaway voices, but voices that don't really need to be developed. Well, they do need to be developed, but not as much as your main character voices. But a good study in listening to an audiobook narrator doing very subtle character voice shifts, is Scott Brick's narration of Jurassic Park. I always recommend that one. If you want to hear a fantastic narrator go through the subtle shifts in character voices, Jurassic Park is a great one to listen to, and I always recommend that one. Mary says, hello from sunny Tampa, frustrated at Audacity because changing one setting, amplify, changes other settings, and then the ACX check fails. I can totally relate to that, and I don't, it's not you. It's not you, Mary Lynn, at all. It's pretty typical. It's a common complaint. I had the same issue. And this is where taking the time to play with the different effects or getting assistance from someone else who knows the DAW that you're working on can maybe suggest a few different settings for you to help make all of these effects sort of work in harmony together. Is there a way to make an effects rack on Audacity? I always forget. I use Adobe Audition, so I haven't opened up Audacity in a long time, so I'm not completely savvy, but usually it's the effects that you're using and then also the order in which you're applying them. So for Adobe Audition, to build a rack, if you're looking at it, and I guess I could go back to my Adobe Audition, but the slots in the effects rack are numbered. So the number 1 slot is going to be applied first. The effect in number 2 slot will be applied second. And it really does matter what order they're in, too. But typically, what immediately comes to mind when you say that you're amplifying, but then your RMS is thrown off, that tells me that perhaps there are some peaks in your dialogue that are just are too high. And this is pretty typical. Because if you keep in mind, RMS is just the average volume of dialogue. I don't know why I'm so froggy this morning. RMS is average volume of dialogue. So you might want to consider using a little bit of compression. You might even have to manually turn some of those peaks down depending on what's happening within that file. But if you're amplifying the entire file, then that means that some of those RMS peaks are going past probably that -3 dB mark. So you might need to add a little bit more compression, which will bring down the overall. It basically does what it sounds like. It's compressing. So it's bringing your peaks a little bit lower and it's expanding out your lows a little bit higher. So your volume is a little bit more uniform going through the entire file, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm going 50 different directions. Squirrel. As Abe says, the secret to Audacity is learning what order to run your effects in. And that's pretty much how it is across the DAWs, right? It does matter what order they're in as well. I usually focus on In terms of order of effects, I'll focus on what I want to remove or reduce or improve first, and then I'll enhance after that. So usually the first thing in my effects rack is a noise reducer, if needed, and then maybe a deplosive, because even though I have a pop filter here, I do move around a lot when I narrate, and there are some wayward plosives that still make it in. So I'll have like a light deplosive applied. I have a light DS because I'm naturally sibilant. And then I have my, what else? I'm trying to picture it. And then I have an equalizer, then a compressor, and then I think that's it. But of course, you don't want to apply effects unless you need them too. I want to stress that as well. If you see somebody on YouTube or listening to me and you're like, oh, I need a DS, maybe you don't. Don't use an effect just because someone mentions it. You may not need it. Even though the effects are meant to improve the sound of our audio quality, every one that you apply has a destructive quality to it. And it may not work in harmony very well with another effect that you're using. So don't use an effect just because someone says that they do. You may not need it. So again, your best bet is just to get an audio engineer involved, or get into a group and ask a question. Say, hey, record something and then post it like in the Discord group or something and say, hey, what does this sound like it needs to you? Right? Tangulants. I saw that. I'm in fuego today with the tangulants, I tell you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on the planet. Coffee is fresh and waiting on a tangulant. Alicia, hi. Hi. Hello, everyone. Paul is here. Howdy. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Pamela. In the Pacific Northwest, it is a gorgeous day. It's not too bad in Phoenix either. It's only like 74 right now. I had all the doors open this morning. It was great. Some fresh air in here. Glowen says, my biggest struggle is character voices. I've been trying to read fiction books, and it's a serious challenge for me to differentiate voices. And I hear this all the time. And I think in our heads, when we think of character voices, I think our brains immediately revert to like cartoonish kind of voices, right? Extreme characterized voices when they don't need to be. They can be just subtle shifts in either the rhythm in which they speak, the attitude that they have, right? You could have a very fast talker, someone who's very confident and chatty and talks really fast. Or you can have someone that's a little bit more thoughtful when they speak. They're a little calmer. Subtle shifts. They don't have to be extreme. Maybe someone is talking, they speak way up in their head. Or maybe they can talk down here in their chest. Maybe they have a slight accent. Maybe they have a little bit of a lisp, right? What is the character's attributes? What is their backstory, right? I bring this example up a lot. Is it maybe a former boxer, right? Is his nose kind of mushed in? I mean, there's a lot of different subtle ways to change character voices. Males will usually, I don't want to say usually, but an easy way to have a voice shift from, let's just say, male to female. Males are usually more matter of fact. They usually end their sentences on a down note, right? Whereas females are a little bit breathier. They can speak, they can end on a higher note more often, right? Right? I mean, subtle, very, very subtle. You don't have to overthink it and think of the voices needing to be extreme. Unless it's like a sci-fi, and that's where you can really have some fun with it. You can start using effects on some of the voices, but for the most part, just subtle character shifts. But a lot of it is attitude, right? What's their personality like? And that will help you determine a character voice for them. Gia says, hello, everyone, in the Angelaverse. That's my next t-shirt. Hello from the Angelaverse. Hope everyone's day is fantastic. I second that. Sage, you made it. Good afternoon, everyone. I picked character voices, but I would have preferred all of the above. I'm still a fledgling VO at this point, so I need to learn everything. You do, but keep in mind and remember, don't allow yourself to get stuck in the procrastinating stage. You will learn so much more by doing than by watching other people do it. 100%. 100% stand on that. So don't hold yourself back, Sage. Get out there and experience. You will learn so much more faster. Don't just sit there and watch other people do it. Rustic Hillbilly, good morning. Beautiful day in Oregon. You're lurking as you drive home? Well, I hope you're just listening. Don't be watching while you're driving. Ken says, morning all from sunny Alberta. Busy times with wife running for city council. Wow, so my VO work is on hold for a couple weeks. Yeah, I can see that. I could see that. Wow. Mary Lynn says, I'm a newbie too, taking notes today. Kesha says, hello. Kansas Hearts? Is that what you're saying? New audiobook narrator. I have a few books on Audible. Good for you. Good for you. Lisa says, good morning, also from sunny Alberta. Ken says, I think I have been following your usual formatting process, but watching with great interest. Good. And if there was anything that I went too fast with or skipped over, or I've done this a million times at this point. So if there's something that I missed, or you have a question about something that I did or didn't do, please ask. It's not going to insult me or anything. Ask. Janelle says, hey, Angela. Hi, Janelle. Hey, everyone. I'm usually pretty organized, but prepping the manuscript takes time. I'm still working on a better system with every project. And this was a question that came up in the audiobook class last week. Manuscript prep. How you prep the script is going to be up to you. Again, this isn't really a linear or a one way to do it. It's really what works for you. Ideally, you want to have the manuscript. That was another question. Someone had asked if you print them all out. I did in the beginning thinking that was the right thing to do. But really, if you think about paper and toner and, every audition printing out, it's just going to end up costing you more just to audition. And it takes more time to do all of that versus just pulling it up on your computer screen, doing the audition, submit, and move on to the next one, right? You want it to take as little time as possible. I mean, you want it to sound good and do the work, invest the time to make it sound the best audition you can make it, but you want it to be relatively quick. Manuscript prep, ideally you want the audiobook or the manuscript to be delivered to you in either Word format or PDF format. I have had some clients send me an EPUB version before, meaning they probably were self-publishing, and they, that there's certain formats for ebooks that the manuscripts need to be in, and they didn't know how to convert it, or they didn't have the original Word document or PDF. If you go to cloudconvert.com, I believe, it's free to use. You can upload the EPUB version they give you and then tell it, hey, I would like to download this as either a PDF or a Word document, depending on what's available on your computer. And then it'll convert it and then send it back to you, and you can download it, and it's free. So it's pretty awesome. But generally, most of the time, they're either in Word or PDF. So what you can do with Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF or Acrobat, you can highlight dialogue in different colors. You can assign a character, each character a different color, and you can highlight their dialogue so it's easy to see as you're going through, like whose voice is coming up next. You could also change it up, right? You could make the font bigger, change the font. That manuscript you're not giving back to the client unless you're proofing it for them. So you can change it up so it's more easy to read for you. You can add commas. You can, if you have like a tablet where you can mark up stuff, you can, you bold something, circle something, underline something. Do whatever it is that you need to do to make it an easier and more effective reading experience for you, right? Just do what you got to do with a manuscript. Edmonton. Kesha says, I use Audacity for recording. My DAW is a pain to get right with ACX requirements. And to be completely honest with you guys, that was one of the things that made me switch from Audacity to Adobe Audition as well. Audacity, it made things more difficult, I think, in my opinion, than they needed to be. Whereas Adobe Audition, everything just worked. Everything was like intuitive. I just it just felt right to me. And getting ACX requirements correct on Adobe Audition was so much easier. It was still, a lot of trial and error, don't get me wrong, to get all the effects right, to play well together. But it just was a lot less frustrating using it on Adobe Audition versus Audacity. And I know Audacity is free, and Audacity is great for being free, right? But it takes a little bit more finesse, a little bit more with Audacity to get things right than Adobe Audition. But to be completely honest, that was one of the reasons I made the switch. But it can be done. There's a lot of people that still use Audacity. I'm not knocking it at all. I'm just being open and honest with you. Tanya says, evening all. I've said voices not because I have difficulty doing them, but I've had differences of characterization with the rights holder which caused re-records. Character sheets matter. They do, and I highly recommend having a conversation about character voices with a rights holder before you even start recording. And I'm not talking to you directly, Tanya, but to everybody listening. That is definitely a conversation you want to start before you start recording, because you don't want to have to go through and re-record a bunch of chapters and change up character voices, right? So if there are a lot of different characters, if you're asking the rights holder what their vision is for this, if there's anything you need to know about the characters, do they have you can even go as far as to ask them for an example of what they were looking for. If there's another audiobook that they've heard and the characters were similar to what they were looking for as in terms of differentiation, you can ask for that. But definitely a question, especially if, again, if it's a fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, something where the character voices can be a little bit outlandish, a little bit cartoonish, like if it's a robot or an alien, for example, then you probably want to have a few sample voices of characters that you can sustain, right, recorded on an audio file, and then send that to the rights holder and get their feedback on it. And they can tell you, yes, that's great, it's exactly what I was looking for, or, let's try this instead, right? But usually with nonfiction and most of the fiction books that I have done, it hasn't really come to that. But if you are in the, fantasy realms, genres, sci-fi, things like that, I would definitely consider talking about character voices first. Chuck is here. Hey, Chuck. Hey, everybody. Dylan is here. Hey, Dylan. How you doing, Dylan? Haven't seen you in a while. Good afternoon, all. Feeling a bit burnt out, so I joined VOA to see you all again and steal your infectious energy. That's awesome. We're so glad to have you back, Dylan. You were missed. Lisa says, Ken was Edmonton a long time ago, now live close to Holden. Dylan says, that being said, I didn't choose an option. I'm nowhere near a pro. But after 20 books, I've pretty much got my process down. So I'd say that's pro. Just saying. Hey, Kat, how you doing? Good morning. Was early, then got a PH call. So here's blueberry fritters. I'll take them. Chuck says, I struggle with just how over the top I should go with character voices. I've recorded 3 of my own fiction romance books, but don't feel confident about them yet. Have you gotten feedback on them? Because we have to remember, our worst critics are ourselves. So your character voices might be just fine, unless somebody tells you, hey, you might want to dial that one back, which almost never happens, right? As we talk about in Launchpad and, all of the groups that we're in, we talk about when you're recording something, whether you're expressing emotion, you're performing as a character, whatever it is, it feels sort of silly and weird to us because that's not normally how we talk, right? So it feels weird, it feels off, or almost too much most of the time. But usually when you get to that point of too much is where it's probably just perfect. It's too much because it feels different. It feels strange. That's not the norm, right? And you will feel that a whole lot more in the beginning because you're now sort of, stretching your voiceover legs. Once you do it a lot, then it'll become pretty much normal. It won't feel as strange. So just keep at it, is what I'm saying. But if you're really, truly concerned about the characters that you've done, feeling like they're too much, get some feedback on them, right? You probably hear, oh, they're just fine. You're overthinking it, which is usually what it is. Sending energy to Dylan with a chocolate bar. That'd do it. Glowen says, hey, Dylan, you're a pro now. Hoping to catch up to you. Yes. Yeah. I would say, Dylan, stop obsessing on not being a pro. You're pretty much a pro at this point. Gregory is here. Hello, Sir Gregory. Joy. Hey, Joy. Good afternoon, Angela, and everyone from cloudy, rainy Southfield, Michigan. I have problems with making my character voices distinct. If I have less than 2 of them and keeping up with them as I record, it can be challenging. I think, a good practice, if you're not opposed to it, is to become one of your characters for the day, or both of them, and just talk like them all day, right? That'll help kind of give you the time to really step into their shoes and put their clothes on, if that makes sense, right? Like, how would this character handle this situation? How would this character make their coffee? How would they talk about it? What would they say? You could spend some time doing that, and hopefully by the end of the day, the character voices will be more normal feeling, right? You can do that. Tanya says to Joy, have you tried basing them on someone that they remind you? Yes. Eric would recommend Positron as a way to keep files with examples of each character's voice. That is the easiest way to create character voices, I think, is who does that character remind you of? If there's a voice for that character that you're thinking, who does that voice remind you of? And then you could have pictures. If you're one of those people that builds character sheets, which you can, and on that character sheet, you could have the character's name, their backstory, a picture of maybe a famous person that their voice reminds you of, so you can easily sort of revert right to them. You could do that. But if they remind you of someone that you see on the screen, TV or movie, then you could sort of just pick up on their attributes and their mannerisms and all of those things. Makes it a little bit easier to sustain a character. And then you could keep a master file on your DAW, or on your computer rather, of each character's voice. And then you could use, like on Adobe Audition, you can have markers, and then you can rename the marker with that character. So as you're looking through the master file of voices, you can sort of look for that marker with a name. Okay, that's that character. Take a listen and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's who that character was. So there's a few different ways to go about it. But don't, Joy, and for anyone else listening, don't let all of those things stop you. There's a lot of different ways, and any which way that you feel is easiest for you to keep track of characters and their voices, do that. There isn't just one way to do it. Hey, Joel. How you doing? Gregory says, hello there, Angelas and Angelos. Angela Lowe's? What are you talking about? I found my character voices are imprisoned in all the Star Wars, Star Trek, Alien, Superman, Batman, and Indiana Jones movies. Hey, man, if it works, right? Abe says, Kesha and Marie, are either of you on Launchpad in the Discord? I believe they both are. I believe they both are. Kesha says, I make voice files on my phone to keep up with my character voices. There you go. Kesha says, Abe, I'm on Discord. I haven't been active in about a year and a half, getting back into it very soon. Good, good, good. That random Yoruba guy says, finally caught a live session today. Hello. Glad you're here. Abe says, if you do get back on, hit me up. I'm familiar with Audacity. Maybe, there you go. Help is available. Voiceover and audiobook, these industries have some of the most helpful, supportive people I have ever met. Help is out there. Just ask. Ask for it. Welcome, welcome. Gregory says, I've imitated and quoted to myself while cleaning or traveling to know how long things take. I've had to assign certain voices to characters I'm trying to portray in an audiobook. My brain, man. Hey, it's not just your brain. I mean, that's a great way to go about it. It's a great way to come up with character voices. Another way is to have archetypes in your head. Like for me, I have like the lumberjack who is kind of gritty and manly, you know, and then I have like the Barbie who is kind of like bubbly and happy all the time. I mean, whatever the archetype is for you, you can have like a stable of just like basic archetypes of voices or people that you've met. And then you can also take those archetypes and then slightly tweak them to fit the character that you're trying to narrate for. I mean, however it is that you want to do it. Right? There really isn't really one right way to do it. Kesha says, I surely will, probably sometime this month. Looking at a few titles on ACX to audition for. Good. Joyce says, sorry, hit the button too soon, but I really need to get Positron for Reaper. Positron is awesome. Let's see. Dwight. Hey, Dwight. Goodness gracious. Good day, everyone. Hello, Miss Angela. It's been a minute. It has. I hope this finds you doing well. Sorry I'm late, but I did bring eclairs. Oh, speaking my language, Dwight. Ken says, hate it when I accidentally skip a leading file number and only notice it when doing final mastering. Did I explain why I name the files the way that I do? I don't think that I did. I start with the numbers because the numbers will keep them in order on my computer. Within the file, they're in order. So no matter what the name of the file is, they're always going to be in order because the numbers are first. And then when I send them to the client, when they download them, it's going to do the same on their computer. So there shouldn't be an issue as to what file goes where, because they're going to be numbered in the order in which they're going to be uploaded into ACX. Not only that, but the way that we named it, it's going to tell them the name of the book, and it's also going to tell them the name of the section that that file represents. So you can tell them that these files are numbered in the order in which you're going to upload them to ACX. And if they're, just to double up on the safety, if there's any other issue as to what the file is, if you get stuck, there's also at the end of the name of the file is what this file represents, right? The opening credits, the retail sample, chapter 1, chapter 10, so on and so forth. So you're not only making the organization easy for you, but you're also making the organization easy for the client. And when I say you're sending them to the client, this is like off ACX. So if someone hired you on Fiverr, let's just say, to create an audiobook, if you name all the files in this manner and then you upload or deliver your files to the client in this manner, then you can tell them, you can include in your delivery verbiage, these numbers or these files are named in the order in which they should be uploaded and also named for the file that they represent. So I don't think I mentioned that. See, I forget stuff. Anne says, good morning all, breakfast for the crew. Breakfast burritos? I'm hungry. Glown says, I do like this notion of creating the folders before actually doing any work. We'll be incorporating that. Yes. Because if you don't, as I showed you before in Adobe Audition, and I'm sure some of the other DAWs are the same, once you save something somewhere and then you open up a new file and save it, if you're not paying attention, it may just save it to that last place that you were at yesterday or earlier today, and you don't remember where that was. Right? So if you have designated places like a file for, or I'm sorry, a folder for Fiverr, a folder for ACX, a folder for Upwork, and then a folder within those folders for each client or username that you're working with, and that'll make it so much easier to find these things later. Kesha says, Angela, you are a blessing to this. Oh, thank you. Gregory says, 37 viewers, 37 thumbs up, right? Yep. Gently hit that thumbs up button and then subscribe and share. And I think there's like a hype thing now. Do all the things. I appreciate it. Tanya says, I mislabeled file 28 of 53 once and didn't realize it until I was uploading to ACX and couldn't find it. After I create all of the files, as I showed you guys before I start recording, I'll just go back and just double check that they're all named correctly, because I've been there, Tanya. I've done the exact same thing. I'm sure a lot of people have. But I'll just double check that everything is right. That way, that's one less thing I have to worry about later. I know that everything is named correctly and is going to be in the correct place, right? So that way, I can just record them, and then after they're all recorded, then I'll edit them, and then I'll send them to where they need to go. Dwight says, I did not answer the poll today. Look at you, rebel. I do suggest that everyone pays attention to Angela on the organization stuff. I think the key thing is finding your organization style and repeat it consistently. Yeah. Me just showing you the way that I do it is just one way to do it. If there's something else that works better for you, then by all means do it, right? Again, there isn't one right way to do this. But that is the way that I have learned, the way that I've been doing it now for, 7, 8 years, that has been the most beneficial. And a lot of it is trial and error. Trust me. I've been there. Life Unleashed says, consider me the group's cannabis grower. Anne says, I'm eyeballs deep in recording and editing a 16.5-hour fantasy book. Oh, tally is up to 40 plus character. Oh. Anne says, my DAW is Logic Pro X. I keep a note with characters and record them in their own track or dialogue between a few in one track so I can reference later. Glowen says, oh my God. How do you keep all those personalities in your head? I struggle with 3 in mine. That's a lot. That's a lot of characters. Anne says to Glowen, I definitely have the main 10 or so characters locked in. Thankfully, the author gave them pretty distinct personalities. That helps. It's a lot. Carrie says, hello all. Hello, Carrie. New here in question. Do you have to do character voices? That is a great question. And the answer is, it's up to the rights holder, right? I would say if you ever have a question about what the character should sound like, or if, and I just remembered I didn't touch on this earlier too, if the rights holder does not want the dedication included, they do not want something in the audiobook, the about the author, if there's a certain section in the book that they do not want included, again, these are all things that need to take place with the author before you start the production process. So let's just say that a rights holder had reached out to you on ACX and they said, hey, I listened to your sample. I love your voice. I think you're going to be perfect for my book. Your first question, and even preferably before you even negotiate rate, because you might decide that this is something that you can't do and you don't want to accept the offer if there's something you can't do. So you want to have a conversation with the rights holder and ask them to send you the manuscript if they can, if you're on a platform where they can, because you yourself will want to verify the word count, right? To make sure that a number wasn't fat fingered or a zero wasn't omitted, right? You want to verify the word count. And then ask them, what is your overall vision for this book? Are there any accents that I need to be made aware of? Are there any special, names? Are there pronunciation tips that you can provide me, right? If it's a fantasy book with made up names and places. Are you able to give me all of this information? How distinct or different do you want your character voices to be? Do you even want me to differentiate voices, right? Because maybe it's like an autobiography and there's going to be dialogue in it, but it doesn't necessarily, it's going to be ultimately up to the rights holder. So have that conversation with them up front. Make sure you skim through the book, again, verify the word count, and then see what sections are in the book, right? You want to look for those dedications. You want to look for citations. You want to look for references. You want to look for about the author, other books perhaps that they've written. There's going to be certain sections that you as an audiobook listener know typically aren't included in an audiobook. So you want to ask them, do you want to include these other sections in your book as well? You can have all of that conversation with them. One other thing that you want to look for is images or graphs, tables, illustrations, things like that, because obviously those cannot be narrated. If you come across a book with illustrations, graphs, tables, charts, stuff like that that can't be narrated in an audiobook, you might want to give the rights holder a heads up that they can include those images in an accompanying PDF with their audiobook. But you as the audiobook narrator need to be able to reference them in some way, shape, or form. So if those illustrations, graphs, things are present in the book, say you can include these in an accompanying PDF, but you need to tell me where I need to reference, see illustration A in the accompanying PDF or something like that, because you may need to direct the traffic to the PDF, right? So that's, again, another conversation that needs to be had with the rights holder. So always, always, always look at the manuscript first if you can, to look for those things. And then at that point, again, ask them what their visions were, how different they want the character voices. If there's accents was a big thing for me because I'm not the best with them. So I've had to turn down books before if a rights holder wanted, any kind of accent other than what I've got here, I might have to turn down the book because I'm just not strong with them. I'm just not, especially if the main character has an accent. Like a British accent, let's just say, can't do it. It's just being honest and transparent, right? But if you're good with voices or accents, rather, then go for it. I'm just not. Glowen says to Carrie, presumably you'll be looking to do mystery, romance, drama narration, so yes. Yeah, Tanya had a big one too, not too long ago. It was a lot. Carrie says, okay, thanks. Joy says, thing is, I love doing accents and can maintain them, but my problem is that I read one character, then oops, all of a sudden I accidentally forget to switch over to the other character voice. Yeah, that is something that definitely takes some practice to do. Again, always in the beginning, you're going to be running across these things. But again, just with everything else, the more and more you do it, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. I think for you, Joy, the best thing for you to do is to probably highlight the different dialogue for the different characters, right? So the female main character perhaps has a pink highlight on their dialogue, and then perhaps the main male character has a blue highlight, and then you can choose different highlights for different characters going forward. That way, as you're narrating, you won't forget, right? You can see that, oh, this is somebody else's voice. That might help. You might want to take the time to do that in the prep process. Peak Parable says, I think the adjusting the voice sound from loud battle cries to soft is hard for me in the editing for balance. And that's something else that takes a little practice. And I think the trick is to sound loud. And we do this a lot with angry voices too, like angry dialogue. Because when we're angry, we get louder, right, in volume. And we don't want to do that with a microphone. So I think proximity helps a lot with that, especially if we're speaking low and calmer, we can get up closer to the microphone. But if we're shouting and getting loud, we need to back away from the microphone, or you can turn the gain down on the microphone as well. Or just sounding angry without getting loud, right? There's other ways to go about that, but a battle cry is going to be difficult. So what you might want to do for the battle cry is perhaps try to record that at a different time on a different file in a few different ways, right? With different sort of proximities, maybe playing with the gain, because that is something that you want to sound loud with volume, but you don't want it to be way louder than everything else and, make the mic sound too hot or clip the audio or anything like that. So that might be a challenge, but it's not a common thing. So you might want to try a few different variations on a separate file and then paste in the one you like. I've had to do that too. Glowen says, I'm not looking forward to having that problem. Tanya says to Anne, top count so far is 87 named characters. 7 languages and 9 accents. Wow. I think you need an award, Tanya. Wow. Kristen says, sorry I'm late. Brought custard-filled chocolate eclairs. Oh, God. Straight to my heart, eclairs. Anne says, oh, I also mark up my script with different colors for different characters. Yep, that helps a ton. And adding a physical characteristic with the voice, like a certain facial shape. Add those characteristics to your note as well. For example, Zach has a low, gravelly voice with my mouth smirked to the left. His lines are highlighted blue. Perfect. That works. Kristen says, I've been avoiding fiction because I just don't feel qualified to do different voices at this time. I'd love to work on it and get better. A great way to do that is to do a fiction book. Even go to Project Gutenberg. Go to Gutenberg.org and try it with one of the books in the public domain. Go through the whole process if you have the time, or just select a chapter with many different characters in it and practice that way. But don't just sit back and go, oh, someday, because someday may never come. So get out there and do it. I'm telling you. Practice. There's ways to practice without actually having a rights holder on the line, right? Tanya says, yes, also age, size, height. What job do they do? What's their background? Having the character sheets, you can make them as detailed as you want to. You can even note where, I believe as Anne said, note where in your face or where in your head or in your chest the voice lives, right? Where it comes from. Damien says, good morning. Good topic. Listening in while I finalized renaming MP3 deliverables for another duet project. Rights holder is self-publishing off of ACX, so there's quite a bit more work to do. Yes, there is. You have a great day. All of you have a great day. Tanya says, Anne says to Tanya, I know, mind blown. Did I just have a stroke? Mind blown. Holy Moses. Lisa says to Anne, I do that also. Different colors for different voice. Then I'll actually record a sample of that character's voice and go back to it if I'm having trouble remembering. It's not because you're old. It's common, Lisa. Dylan says to Glowen, you don't have to go over the top with character voices. Listen to anything by the wonderful Scott Brick. His character voices are very subtle, but effective in distinguishing. Yeah, also keep in mind that as you're reading through the book, you're also going to have that, Dan said, or Mom said, or Grandma said. Not all the time, of course, but you will have other ways to distinguish who is talking, apart from the character voice itself. So it doesn't have to be an extreme voice, right? Gia says, I'm learning to expand my character voices, and listening to a lot of audiobooks helps a ton on picking out the subtleties and differentiation. Yes, if you want to be an audiobook narrator, I highly recommend that you yourself listen to audiobooks. There's a lot you can learn by just listening. Scott Brick. Listen to him. Kesha says, I have asked the authors for a breakdown of their characters, personalities, examples of voice they may want for each character, like a movie star voice. You can. You can ask them for specifics, and a lot of authors will be happy to do that, to make sure that what they're envisioning comes across. A lot of times they'll have it ready for you. Here you go. This is my vision for all of these characters. Glowen says to Dylan, that is a good plan. I heard of his name once before, a few months ago. Never got to looking him up. Will do today. Yes, Scott Brick. Rebecca is here. Hi, Rebecca. Good afternoon. When it comes to character voices, I focus on personality. As we say all the time, fix your face. I'm voicing this one jerk in my current book, and he's so fun. What she means by fixing your face is that if you're angry, make your face angry. If you're happy, smile. Make your face very expressive when you're, emoting. Or, if they're just a cranky person, if you got your brows furrowed and your bottom lip kind of pouting out a little bit, you're just naturally going to sound that way. So remember the physicality that is involved with creating characters as well. It could definitely help. Jason says, I've been doing audiobooks for a little less than a year now, and this is all very solid and practical advice. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm just yapping most of the time, but thank you for that validation. I appreciate you. Kesha says, KS Hearts, and thank you. Dwight says to Kristen, you shouldn't let that stop you. Try a book with two or four major characters and a couple of minor characters. Do a kid's book. Great place to practice. You can go over the top with it too. Kids' books are really fun for developing character voices, like over the top ones. And then once you have voices established, you just dial them back a little bit for fiction. Paul says, my tip for remembering each character's voice, I create a spreadsheet and number each character and save any notes that might be useful. I then record a short example of each character and save it in a cast folder within the main project folder. Then I can open that Cameo file every time I need to record a section of a character and check the baseline. Perfect. Trudy says, if it'll click, please relist your order of cleaning up your recording. Oh, for my effects rack? What I can do is... Here, I'll just show you my effects rack. How about that? Let's go over to Adobe Audition, and hopefully it'll show you. So my effects rack is this. So I have NS1 Mono first, which is a noise reducer. Yep, it is showing good. Which I'm not... An NS1 I've had for years and years and years, but there are other noise reducers that you can use that are probably a little less destructive and a little bit more technologically advanced at this point. But I've used NS1 for probably 8 years now, so, old dog, new tricks. But I use it very minimally, very, very minimally, only because, especially when it comes to audiobooks, because we have the noise floor standard to adhere to. So very, very minimally, I use that. And then I have a mouth declick, which reduces the organic, mouth clicks that we make when we talk. It doesn't matter what I eat, what I drink, how often I brush. It doesn't matter. My mouth is just, I guess, naturally sticky. I don't know what it is. So I have a mouth declick, which is money. Let me tell you. I've used it, I don't even know how long now, but it saved me it's cut down my editing time by 80% or more, because otherwise I was airbrushing. I was brushing out every single mouth click. Then I have a deplosive, then I have a DS, and then I have my equalizer, which was made for me by Tim Tippett when I I actually got to a point a few years ago that I hired an audio engineer to create some shortcuts and to help me with my effects rack and to understand Adobe Audition and all the things. And I chose Tim Tippett's for that, and who's, of course, who I recommend. And then I have a compressor at the end. So then again, the compressor will bring all of my high peaks and my low peaks a little bit more closer and uniform in volume. So that helps with the RMS standard. But that's basically it for my effects rack. And then, of course, my last step always is to normalize to -3. Okay. Let's see. Paul then says, finally, if it's a main character and it has a large amount of dialogue in a chapter, I may record all their lines first and cut and paste between characters. Takes a bit longer. I've been there too. I did a sci-fi book years ago where there were, alien insect creatures and like really fun voices. And some of those I had to record all their dialogue separately so I can apply filters because I had like a special filter for each one of them. So to Paul's point, and as I've been saying this entire session, do what you got to do. There's no right way or wrong way to do it as long as it gets done. Joy says, is that audiobook class available to all of 8? All of us, perhaps? If you're in core, if you're in the core tier of the audiobook, a VO's Journey Academy, yes, all of the classes are available to you in core. Dylan says, has anybody used Positron's manuscript prep? I use their proofing service, but haven't tried the script prep. I think Eric has. Eric Priestman. Joy says, is that, answer that question. Dwight says, when I have multiple voices, I create a sample voice lexicon and go to sentence or phrase to click into that voice if I forget and I can't switch to it easily. Yep, like a cast file or a master file, master voice file, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Or you can have individual files with each character in it, right? However you want to do it. But that's definitely a great way to keep track. Craig says, hi there, Angela, from North Central Massachusetts. Procrastinating. Been there. Seem to be doing that. Gotta hustle it up. It just seems everything costs so much money. There's a lot you can do with no money. There's a lot, and most of it just comes down to practice. Practice, practice, practice. You can go to Gutenberg.org, as I mentioned, and find a book there that to practice with, to create, there's so much you can learn in just the doing, and that's free. It just costs you a little bit of time, right? Kesha says, I need to learn Adobe Audition. You're welcome. Rebecca says to Dylan, waiting for more PFH jobs before pulling the trigger on Positron, but I have been metaphorically pressed up against the window staring at it longingly. Dylan says Scott Brick narrates a couple of small indie books like Jurassic Park and Blade Runner. Yeah, Scott Brick is the dude. Yes, definitely keep communicating with your rights holder. Yes. Gramps says, there you are again. Hi, Gramps. I'm here again. Glowin says to Rebecca, Eric has me sold on it after watching him work with it. Like you, though, I'm waiting to make some coins before doing this. Spending any more money. Gramps says, Jay Jones, candidate for Virginia Attorney General, may want to dial that one back. I missed it. Chuck says, haven't submitted any samples to anyone yet for feedback. I think I would be more comfortable with Scott Brick's sort of subtle changes. Dylan says, the proofing service isn't too bad. I think it's $12 per finished hour billed monthly. They got me hooked with a couple of free hours, and I haven't looked back. The first taste is free. That's how they get you hooked. The first taste is always free. Joy says to Dylan, how do you like that Michigan game? Let's see. I can find some more questions. Glowin says, oh my God, that would be so funny in my day job. Speaking in a couple different character voices, just for the record. I deal with the public all day long as well as my staff. Do it. Mix it up a little bit. Keep them on their toes. Kristen says to Dwight, thanks for all that advice, Dwight. I do want to try out a children's book. I just don't see many to audition for on ACX. I think I need to cast a wider net and try other platforms. Gutenberg.org. There are children's books on Gutenberg.org. Joy says, hello, Dwight. The sample voice lexicon is a cool idea. George is here. Hey, George. Hi, Angela. You're my favorite YouTube star. Oh, stop. He's Reaper. So my last step in any chapter is to render using the normalize tool. I set it to ACX RMS standards and also limit it to a negative 3.15. Yep, that's good. As long as it's under negative 3, right? And keep in mind that that peak amplitude standard is not a target, it's a threshold. So you're not aiming for your files to end up at negative 3 for the peak amplitude standard. They have to be under negative 3. They cannot eclipse negative 3. And so many people think that they have to be at negative 3. They don't. If it's at negative 3.85, you're fine. If it's at negative 3.15, you're fine. If it's at negative 3.01, you're fine. You just can't be at negative 2 or negative 1, anything. It's too high. So that's not the target. It's a threshold. So keep that in mind. Kesha says, I greatly appreciate the assistance through the past 4 years of my VO audiobook career. Of course, I'm glad that I'm helpful in any way, shape, or form. I don't consider myself a YouTube star at all. That's kind of my introvert screaming, but I'm just here to help. Oh, I'm sorry. Dylan says to Joy, I'm sending all the positive vibes your way. Ken says, question. Do you keep versions of your recorded files? I keep 4 versions of each chapter. Raw, edited, finished, effects applied, completed as MP3. I do. I only keep the raw version. And when I say raw, it's not completely raw. It is effects are on and edits are made. So it's basically revision ready. So if there are any revisions that I need to make, I will make them to that raw file and then renormalize it and then convert it to an MP3 and send that revised file to the client. But those are really the only 2 versions that I keep, is the raw file and the finished file. But again, the raw file is got effects applied and edits made. So it's revision ready, basically. Glowen says to Ken, I do that as well. Raw, effects 1, effects 2, and MP3. Ken says, last book just completed, had 86 individual, wow, that's a lot of files. Kristen says, Ken P, I do too, and sometimes I feel a bit overwhelmed organization-wise. I just want to make sure I have all versions, though, in case I need them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, definitely in the beginning, keep your raw files. Because especially if you're just learning effects and how they play well together, you might not like the final result of something. So you can, if you don't like it, you can trash it and then go back to your raw file. So just keep that in mind. Keep a raw version of your file so you can go back to it. And you won't have to just go, oh God, now I got to re-record that whole file again. I have to go back and re-record chapter 1 again, right? Try to keep a raw file at the very least. Joy says, thanks, Dylan. Kristen says, Tanya, wow. Yeah, that's a lot. Kat says, what if the rights holder asks you to organize them in a different specific way? That's fine. I've never had anybody tell me otherwise. It's the only thing I can think of is maybe a different naming style, but there is a naming requirement for ACX as well. And the way that I have shown you is accepted and has been accepted for years. I can't think of a different way to name them, and maybe just the order in which the names go, perhaps. But ultimately, it's up to the rights holder, and if it's ACX compliant, that's all that really matters, right? Kat says, ask them if you can do it the way you normally do or just go along with how they want it. Again, if how they want it is ACX compliant, just do it how they want it, right? Glowen says, breaking news. Just received email from ACX. Approved your production of mindful algorithms. Congratulations. Yes, open for sale. Open for retail. That's awesome. Great job, Glowen. Rebecca says to Kristen, Angela's right, it's freaking terrifying, but learning by fire is really the best way in this business. We're here for whatever you need along the way. Kristen says, thanks for that advice. I will do a chapter on LibriVox in practice, and there's no pressure there, which is even more appealing. Absolutely. And if you do a book on your own for, on Gutenberg, there's no pressure at all. The only pressure is the pressure you put on yourself. Clown says, thank you all. Pretty excited now. Let's go. Yep. You're back out auditioning today, right? Christy Lynn says, if you aren't listening to the audiobooks of others, you should. They are such a great resource. That's right. Christy Lynn is the one that says that the best. Fix your face. Kristen says, voiced by Rebecca. Thanks so much, Rebecca. I always hear your voice in my head when I see that. Fix your face. It's always your voice. Fix your face. Dwight says, I make my audio lexicon using multitrack, a file for each of the voices. I can also store unique effects for the voice. That's a good one too. That would be one other reason to use multitrack, especially if you've got a effects on each. Yep, that would make sense. Good call, Dwight. Christy Lynn says, I keep my original raw files and my edited. I do all my pickups in the raw file. Yep, same. How do we send these files? Dropbox or something like that? It depends on the platform that you're on. If it's Fiverr, I upload all the files directly. I'll just make multiple deliveries. That way they're all stored on Fiverr. I've had multiple times where I've delivered an audiobook on Fiverr via like a Google Drive folder link or a Dropbox link or something like that. And then years later, the client's like, hey, what happened to my files? Because obviously you're not going to, have that Google Drive folder forever. So to nip that in the bud, I just upload them directly to the platform. That way they're stored there. They can always go back and re-download them if they want to. But if you're working with someone via email or something like that, you can send them via like WeTransfer or a Google Drive folder link. Just tell the client that this link is only going to be available for X amount of days, and it's going to be deleted after X day, so they make sure to download them. But any which way that you want to send files. Christy says to Life Unleashed, they're uploaded to ACX if your contract is in ACX. Otherwise, it's up to you and the rights holder. Glowen says, did 2 auditions this morning. Going to do another this afternoon. Awesome. Oh, yeah, I forgot about Fiverr. I got banned. Upwork needs to be uploaded there as well. Yeah, if it's on ACX that you're uploading files, you can upload them directly in each assigned slot for ACX. But if it's off of ACX, any which way that you want to. But I do recommend that if it is a site like Upwork or Fiverr where you can upload files directly, I recommend that you do that so they're stored there. So you don't have a client 2 years later going, hey, where's my files? Oh my gosh, we've been on for a while, like an hour and a half. Holy Moses, time went by fast. But that should do it for today. If you guys have anything that you want to talk about in the future, remember these live streams are for you. They're not for me, they're for you. So if there's something that you want to know more about, get together as a group and talk about. Something you want to know more about, and it doesn't have to be audiobooks. It can be voiceover. It can be meditation, even e-learning, IVR, whatever. Just tell me, and it could be something that we talk about in the future. So tell me. Don't keep it a secret. Tell me. So anyway, I'll be back next week. Let me take this comment off of here just so. Okay, good. All right, awesome. So I'll be back next week, next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. So until then, keep practicing and stop procrastinating. I'll see you later. Bye.